Hello and welcome to the December edition of Mytech U. Today we're going to talk about 4 cloud solutions that you should know for 2015. These are some basic but yet complementary solutions that many of us are using, some of them already, or people in your organization are using already in some way, shape, or form. But we're going to go over and cover some of the high-level things that have changed with them, why they're important to you, and of course, we also welcome questions from the audience. So please use the question panel on the section of the control panel, and we will be able to answer some questions offline or interject them throughout the presentation. I'm joined today by Philip Holt. Between the two of us, we're going to go over these 4 sections today, the 4 solutions. But without further ado, Philip, let's go ahead and get started.
Fantastic.
All right, so just as a high level, which we sent out in the invitation as far as what solutions we're going to cover, we're going to talk about Microsoft O365. This is not, Microsoft O365 is not new. However, there have been some recent changes that we do want to make sure everyone's aware of that even make it more compelling as far as an offering and for you to consider as an organization. Secondly, we're going to talk about the Mytech SyncTool, which many people have heard of Dropbox or Box or some of these solutions that are out there that are consumer grade, but this is a business class solution that we'll touch on. We're also going to touch on the spam filtering, but basically not the spam filtering part of it, but how there's email continuity, email archiving and encryption, as well as then being able to provide, what is such a critical service, 100% uptime to your email, which I know is a kind of a bold statement, but we'll touch on that later in the presentation. And finally, Philip is really going to dig into the hosted Active Directory and how it provides, failover and redundancy, for what a lot of us, when we think about how we roll out solutions to our staff, it's another username and password they have to remember. But this is one of the ways in which you can keep that single sign-on. So all they have to remember is their username and password, and whenever that username and password or that password gets reset, guess what? It resets for a bunch of stuff. So that's one of the things we're going to touch on there. So let's go ahead and dig into the Microsoft O365 section, Philip. So for most of the folks on the call, and we have a few that we'll touch on the nonprofit section too, because we have some nonprofit folks on the call as well. The new O365 business plans, they basically they don't call it small business plans, they call it the business plan versus the enterprise plan, are for companies with less than 300 users. That actually covers most of our customers. Most of our customers are actually less than 100 users. So one of the things that they've distinguished, and I want to make sure that the folks on the call understand, is that the Office 365 Business Essentials for the enterprise is actually $8, but for the small business, if you have less than 300 users, it's actually for $5 per user per month. Now, one of the things that I will note is that all the dollars that I actually present here, they're readily available on Microsoft website if you can navigate the thousands of pages they have there. But the numbers that I'm presenting here are actually the annual pay. So if you pay for 12 months at a time, that's when these numbers apply. If you end up choosing to pay up monthly, they increase slightly as far as your monthly cost. But if you pay annually, that's what these numbers are here. So the Business Essentials plan really is the core functionality that Microsoft is offering from a hosted suite. It's email, it's Link, which is an instant messaging, video conferencing, screen sharing, collaboration tool. If you haven't heard of Link, it's a phenomenal product. It gives presence, and again, it's a very simple video conferencing and screen sharing if you're trying to collaborate with someone.
Nate, just to jump in for those.
Go ahead, Phil, please. Yes.
Microsoft recently announced, because as we most likely know, Microsoft loves word games. Microsoft Link is now or will shortly be known as Skype for Business. So if you see those names coming together, know that Skype for Business is in fact Link.
Yes, thank you, Philip. That is, and I think they're going to be somehow integrating with something else out there called Yammer, and they're going to be doing some changes in that regard. But the core functionality is definitely you can do video calls over it and audio calls over it. You can again screen sharing and instant messaging. And again, one of the other things is presence. Like I have Link up on my screen right now, and I can see which of our team members are actually online and available at their machine. So if I needed to get a hold of them quickly, I could see that they're immediately available, and I can IM them. So cool functionality that we actually use quite a bit here at Mytech, and not many people have heard about it. So that's why we always like to call that out a little specially. So that's the Business Essentials plan. Now, the next one is the business package, which actually oftentimes people misunderstand that the business package includes the essentials package, but it actually doesn't. So the business package is basically if you wanted to just license your office suite, such as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Publisher, and OneNote, just those applications, this is a way where you can just basically pay Microsoft instead of buying your licenses through a lot of the traditional ways where you're buying Office 2013, right? Notice that doesn't have a year associated with it or a version of Office because it's always the current version. So if you want to just pay Microsoft from on an annual basis for your Office licensing, this ends up being, I think when I did the math, $99 a year. So $99 a year for this suite of Office licensing per user if you pay annually, and you always have the current version. That includes being able to use Office in the cloud, as well as Office being able to install on up to 5 devices for that user. If they have a laptop and a desktop, if they have a Mac, if they have a or a tablet, etc.
Yeah. A good call out here is to point out that this method of licensing Microsoft Office Suite, unlike all the other traditional methods, is a per-user licensing as opposed to a per-device user. So just worth noting if you're in an organization where your user count differs drastically from your device count, that's another variable to be considered.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. And then the next package is the business premium package, which does then include both. Basically, it's a combination of the business and the essentials package. So it includes all the hosting options as well as your Office licensing. So if you're just looking for hosting of email, link, and some file storage or SharePoint, then the $5 per user. If you just want to license your Office licensing through O365, you can do the business package. If you want to do both, you can do the business premium. And again, if you do that monthly as opposed to annually, it goes up $250 per user. So it ends up being $15 per user per month if you pay monthly. But if you pay annually, it's $12.50. So the reason why we call this out, and I don't usually like to call out pricing in the webinar, is because it's not trying to be a sales pitch. The point is that these Microsoft and Google have been in this fight for reducing costs, which is a great thing for our customers because, quite frankly, you can't build an infrastructure to host your email cheaper than this. So it actually makes a lot more sense for a lot of our customers as we're considering if they're making email changes or if they're considering email continuity, if they're looking at making changes to their email. It makes a lot of sense to move towards this kind of a plan. So Philip, go ahead and please go to the next one. We'll cover the enterprise plans. I wanted to provide a little bit of a segue there with that last bullet, but unless you have any comments on this slide in particular.
Not at the time. Okay.
So the enterprise plans, basically they're the same kind of plans that we just reviewed at the business level, but the limit is that there's no limit, there's no upper end limit, right? But if you have more than 300 users, you're ineligible for the other one, the business plans. And so basically it's the same kind of stuff, same plans, except they call it the E1 plan, and it's $8 a user per month if you pay annually versus the $5. It's $12 a user per month versus the $8.25, and it's $20 per user per month versus the $12.50. And again, the key difference is if you're an organization of larger than 300 users. But also consider if you are an organization that is larger than 300 users, these prices are still relatively and pretty competitive, and compared to if you had to build the infrastructure yourself and build the redundancy yourself to provide this solution to your organization. But I don't want to spend much time on the enterprise plans, but I do want to touch on the nonprofit plans because I know there's some nonprofit folks on the phone here. So O365 at the business essentials level, they donate it. So your hosted email and link and SharePoint, it's free. Now, if you want to add in your Office licensing into that, so essentially the premium, so you get the hosting plus your Office suite licensing, it's only $2 per user per month. On Microsoft's site, it wasn't very clear if you had to do an annual commit on that or if that was just monthly pay. Probably is an annual commit. But just to let you know, that it's actually $2, so $24 a year to basically keep your Office licensing always on the current version. So for nonprofits, that's a great deal. Now, again, the same limitation is 300 users. So if you're a nonprofit that's larger than 300 users, the E1 plan is still donated. But if you're trying to also get your hosting plus your Office licensing, it actually ends up only being $450 per user per month So it's still very cost effective to get your office licensing for larger nonprofits as well. So again, the key here is that this is, definitely one of the core hosted solutions that is, we run into very few reasons when we've looked at our customer scenarios why they wouldn't, when they're making a change to their email environment, why they shouldn't do this. Now, with all fairness, and Philip, chime in here, there's definitely times that we see organizations and what they're operating, how they're operating, and how they're integrating their systems where it doesn't make sense to move their email to the cloud. But I think those are the anomaly. I don't know, Philip, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. So one of the big things to note here is O365, because we're talking about putting stuff in the cloud, we're essentially moving it off-site. So for those organizations who have kind of a single site with a high user density and smaller internet connection sizes, they may find that the performance of their email and exchange actually goes down if they have a large number of users who are used to being in the same building near their exchange server and they're moving everything to the cloud. That doesn't always necessitate a limitation, but in some locations, specifically if there are rural locations where getting large, fast, cheap pipes is difficult to do, sometimes the cost offsets are there. One of the other considerations is, although Microsoft has made a lot of assurances about security and their hosted platform conforms to all of the major regulatory requirements, there are still those individuals who want to have full control over their information in certain legal professions. So that's been another reason. Well, kind of the last comment I want to make on the changes here at Microsoft O365. For those of you who have been savvy and following along, there used to be like a medium business tier and a small business tier that Mytech has historically recommended against for our customers. And the change that is moving us toward, that makes the Business Pro plans much more, Business Essentials and Business Premium plans more acceptable within the business environment, is in the past you couldn't move between the different plans, and the actual underlying infrastructure that Microsoft built for their medium business and small business packages was completely different than the E1 or the enterprise level products. Microsoft has now converged all of them onto the same platform, the Azure platform, so that you can slide between plans within limitations, but also that the fundamental background infrastructure that drives all of these plans is in fact the same. So that's one of the behind-the-scenes changes that has made the Business Essentials and Business Premium products more desirable.
Well, and thank you for pointing that out, Phil, because the impact that had on some of our customers is that they maybe they merged with an organization, or they had someone set up some trials, and so they had some folks that were actually set up on the small business plan or something like that, but E1 was the right plan for them. Well, we actually had customers that had entire locations that for some reason were set up previously on one of those other plans. In order to move them to another one, it's essentially a completely fresh new setup, a complete new migration, as opposed to, you'd think that it should be as simple as, like what Philip was saying, just move it between plans. That'd be easy, right? Just associate a different billing model, or et cetera. But Microsoft didn't make it that easy. But now they've made those changes, so which is definitely a great thing. Because it's a benefit to us, because it makes it easier for us to serve you, but it's also a cost benefit for you because it's less disruption and less labor to get things moved around. Well, that's all I have for this section for O365. I think O365 is one that's been around a long time, so or it's definitely evolving, and people are pretty familiar with it. But definitely wanted to call out those pricing plans and changes because it's now a really great viable option to use those plans instead of buying Office, even generally via general standard licensing plans. So moving on to the SyncTool, one of the things that that I wanted to call out is that many people, probably Dropbox is probably the most familiar file synchronization tool that exists on the market. I don't know if they necessarily invented it, but they're definitely the ones that put the name on it. And but the problem with Dropbox, in fact, where we've run into customers that have problems with like a Dropbox-like solution, is because it's consumer grade. You don't have any controls over it. It's not encrypted. You don't know what information from your network is being leaked out to devices, because it's not necessarily just a corporate controlled laptop. It could be on a smartphone or a tablet or a home desktop et cetera, and you have no idea where some of the files from your organization go. So where SyncTool came about is trying to rein that in, especially for those that wanted to have a better collaboration amongst their team. So just like Dropbox, this is it is cross-functional across different devices, across different smart devices. It's iOS, Android, Windows, BlackBerry. But what it is managed and secured where Dropbox is not. So that's one of the key differentiations there. We'll get into what the managed and secured means as we dig in here. Part of the secured piece is that the data is encrypted not only when it resides on your device, whether it's your tablet or laptop or desktop, et cetera. It also is encrypted when it's in transit, right? So when it's syncing between, your laptop or your tablet or desktop, it's also encrypted as well as when it's stored. So that's a key differentiator that does not apply to these consumer-grade products. Also, what happens if your device is lost or stolen? I mean, there's thousands of laptops that are left in airports and in cabs around the country annually, let alone the tablets. I don't even know the statistics on that. But what happens if one of those devices is lost or stolen? With Dropbox or solutions like Dropbox that are consumer-grade, the data is not encrypted, and you don't have the ability to do any type of remote wipe. So that's one of the things that's a key function of the security piece, is being able to have access to that. Within a couple clicks, you could actually get the data removed off of those end user devices. The other thing that's a cool, go ahead, Philip. It sounds like you're going to jump in.
I wanted to interject another one of the remote wipe feature is a nice part of the granular control that SyncTool provides, but I think one of the even more important portions of the encryption and the device control function that's worth mentioning is that unlike with other file sharing tools where if you have the username and password access to the site, you can install the agent on any machine you'd like or any device type you'd like. With the SyncTool, you have the ability to, the hosting organization, in this case your organization, has the ability to determine which devices it can be installed on. So if you want people to have this software installed on their corporate laptops but not on their personal cell phones, you have the granularity ability to control who can install and access the device, the information, and also from what devices. I think that's a critical differentiator between this solution and some of the other ones out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Philip. Yeah, especially if, let's say, if you provide tablets and laptops for your traveling workforce or for your power users, but the smartphone is their own. Well, you can disable their ability to put the files on their smartphone because you have access to their laptop and tablet, right? For instance. So yeah, that's a great point, Philip. One of the other features I think that we actually have several of our customers that come to us and ask, I want to be able to share large files because I can't send large files via email. Well, through this, you can actually create guest accounts, and you can share large files with customers and vendors. So if you're collaborating with large documents, you can actually have a custom branded portal, so it's got your logo, and you could actually create a customer or a vendor as a guest, and it would send them a link to be able to download the file, and actually they would be able to see a portal, download the file, and or upload the file if you permit, or upload other files, and you'll actually get notifications when those files are uploaded or downloaded or accessed. So it's something that it's not just a generic, here, log into my Dropbox. It actually can be a branded portal that you have full control over what files they have access to. So any thoughts on that, Philip, before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, I just want to point out that another feature there, Nathan's been talking about guest accounts, and guest accounts implies that there are people who aren't guests, and that brings up another important portion of the SyncTool is that it fully integrates with Active Directory. So those existing users that you will already have and create and maintain inside your organization through the Windows Active Directory structure, those are the same usernames and passwords that people can be using to access this information. So if they change one password, it flows through. Also allows you to know that if you disable access from an individual from your corporate Active Directory structure, they will subsequently also lose access to the associated synced files.
Correct. Perfect. Thank you. So the next slide digs into some of the the remote workers. So one of the things that we see as a common thing is that organizations sometimes will open up a branch office, but that branch office only has a few users. So to minimize the footprint of that office, sometimes those users though end up experiencing very slow file performance because they're going across a VPN or going across the internet connection that they have in order to access files on the server, working on them. And so that either results in a couple things. Either A, just a poor experience. B, oftentimes those users will get frustrated and they'll end up saving files on their local machine, which means they're not being backed up. So one of the things that the SyncTool actually enables to be able to do is you can actually enable this on file shares. So for instance, let's say if it's one of your standard file shares that you see in your My Computer that your organization leverages, you can actually enable that to be synced to different users. So that can be either for power users that travel a lot, and so they're working out of hotel rooms and you don't know what kind of internet connection they're going to have, or just remote branch offices that maybe don't have enough people in them to where it justifies putting in a significant infrastructure. So so that's one of the things that they call it file server enablement. So we can actually make a remote worker seem like or feel like they're actually working off a file server that's local to their desk, if they're in the same location. So that's one of the things that's definitely a component that Dropbox doesn't have. That is a very cool feature. That's more than just the device to device, but it can actually go server to device to enable remote worker functionality. The same kind of works for project teams. So for instance, let's say if you had a special team and you wanted to put together what we call like a team share. So instead of having necessarily creating another folder structure on your server, well, you can actually just create a team share, and that way you can, and the team share could include folks from within your organization and different locations. It could include, a customer if you're collaborating or a vendor if you're collaborating, and you could use those guest accounts to be able to have them to get access to that as well. So it's definitely a way to, and again, with Dropbox or consumer grade solutions like that, you're not going to be able to really limit that control, because if you invite someone to your Dropbox like a vendor or a customer, you're actually going to send all the files and they're going to reside on their machine, and you have no control over whether or not those files ever get removed if you ever want them to. With team shares and doing it this way, you actually have the ability to control who has access from what device, and you can remote wipe if need be, and only do guest access, which means that they don't actually download it to their machine. They'll just have a web portal access to those files. So again, some cool functionality in that regard. Before I move on, Philip, any comments there?
I think you did a great job of summarizing.
Okay. So then again, as we talked about, you can restrict and limit devices and files to protect the organization from data leakage. One of the reasons I could point out about that Dropbox, many of our customers, we found that there's Dropbox on their end user devices. They don't even know it. So that is definitely a risk with regard to data leakage. So this is one of the things that we can help you, if that is a concern of yours, to enforce that, make sure that you don't have Dropbox on your end user devices, and you can actually control and have visibility to that access. Again, the final point is really it's just complete visibility into what people, what devices, and what files are being shared across your organization, and and being able to manage that accordingly. So that's just the differentiation. That's it. Unless you have any comments, Philip, we can move on to the next section.
Let's move on to our third of four, our hosted email continuity and archiving.
Thanks, Philip. So this one, everyone has spam filtering. That's one of the things that, but what the great thing about spam filtering is that there's solutions that have evolved to be more than just spam filtering. So it used to be that you just had inbound spam filtering because you wanted to block the bad stuff from coming in. Now they actually they moved to outbound spam filtering, because in case you end up getting hit with some virus or something like that, it actually would prevent you from sending out a bunch of bad emails as well. So that's kind of the core functionality of spam filter, but it's actually evolved to include many other components because spam filters have access to your inbound and outbound mail. So one of the great things that you can do with spam filter is providing continuity. Actually, many spam filters have been doing this for a while. The problem is that it didn't make it easy. So the way the spam filtering solution that we recommend can provide continuity is that actually there's an agent that exists on your Outlook profile and or on your smartphone or tablet. And if for some reason your local Exchange server or your even O365, because tell you what, everyone, even though O365 is a hosted solution, it's not 100% uptime. So there are outages that happen with O365, and and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You just got to wait for Microsoft to be able to restore the service. So this agent that exists either on your smartphone or your tablet or your Outlook client actually will recognize that, hey, the Exchange server is down, or I'm not able to access my Exchange server, or O365 is unavailable. I'm actually going to route you automatically out to the spam filter. And the next slide actually shows a graphic of this. I'm going to route you automatically out to the spam filter, and because that's where the email actually is sent and received, you can see the inbound mail coming into the cloud, and there's a little fire kind of on the local Exchange or the O365 cloud, and your users or your smartphones actually will then automatically bypass your Exchange server, the O365, and go straight to the cloud. And so in the interim, while your local Exchange or O365 is offline, you can actually still send and receive email. Your users and your customers and vendors aren't going to get any bounce back messages, but your users will still be able to send and receive email, whether it be their Outlook client or their smartphone, until that service is restored, until either Microsoft fixed O365 or it could be your Exchange comes back online. So that's one of the coolest features I think I've seen as far as the spam filter in a long time, because I'll tell you, if there's any technology that our customers and even us use and it has to be up, it's email. And so this is a simple way to make that happen, and it's just really an add-on feature to your core spam filter. The other thing that people have been really asking about lately, especially if you're in a compliance industry, or if you're really you have to archive your email for whatever reason, if you're in a regulated industry, because all of your email, inbound and outbound, goes through the spam filter, you can actually turn on archiving. Some people, the basic archiving, if you just want to keep it around for a little bit, might only be around for 60 days. That's actually some basic archiving. But for those that are in a regulatory industry and need to keep email around, legal, medical, others, where you need to keep it around for longer than 60 days, you can turn it on, and you have storage for up to 10 or more years for email. So it's a really simple way to not have to build an infrastructure, and this is really the kind of the core of what hosting means and why you'd want to leverage these things. Is we've had small organizations, like a small law firm, right? Small law firm that they don't want to buy another $10,000 server or $7,000 server and buy some expensive software to be able to run email archiving, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, this actually is way more cost effective than having to buy and support and maintain and back up that infrastructure locally. So for those organizations that already are doing that, we actually are seeing a lot of customers that have been doing that historically moving to a solution like this, because it's hosted and it's really inexpensive. So Philip, any comments on that? Because I know that you've been involved in those projects in particular.
Sure. I'd like to point out, Nathan kind of talked around the features and the sets and the new things that we can do with some of these continuity programs. But I wanted to kind of just back out and point out what big picture here is that we have moved over the course of time to where we've had requirements to put services in front of our email before it comes into our network, and out after our email before it goes out of our network. And new features available with new hosted products allow us essentially for the short term to bypass the email server in its entirety. So the key takeaway here is your email server can blow up and you can still send and receive email. And that's really a critical functionality that we have not had in the past.
And also because, as you mentioned, Philip, basically the fact that we have to set some service in front of our server before it receives email and after our server before it sends out email, then that's what enables the archiving, and that's also what enables email encryption and being able to send, secure messages. Especially in the medical world, PCI world, anything that's where you're sending sensitive information, email is inherently an insecure protocol, and unless you're doing some sort of email encryption, any of that data can be received by someone that you don't intend. So being able to turn on then features like email encryption as your email goes out of your network is actually another simple add-on functionality if that's something you need. So these services have been great to be layered in over the years with regard to your core spam filtering functionality, but then finding other value-add ways that people truly do use their email, whether it be archiving or continuity or encryption. So the next slide, we kind of already covered that, just as far as how that goes. So Philip, I put this one at the end specifically because it works with all the other ones. So tell us about how this, this solution and how this works and what's included.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So as we've move forward, a lot of our customers are asking more and more about, because we have all these great options for hosted email and hosted file sync and hosted applications and SaaS-based solutions, the questions come up is like, so why do I need a server? Why do I still have to have a big machine that sits in the corner with blinky lights on it in my office? And it's always been hard to give a good reason as to why you need that, because all of the data that folks want access to is no longer on the local network. The security component and what we call the functional part of what Windows Server infrastructure called Active Directory is that part that holds all the usernames and passwords. It also knows about which computers are part of its network and which part of it aren't. And that is a core functionality that is oftentimes overlooked in terms of what a real server provides and what differentiates a client-server network from a simple workgroup. Those Active Directory components integrate very well with the O365, with the file sync tools, with our email continuity products, with a lot of other web-based and SaaS-based applications. However, they still require you to have this Active Directory structure, which historically has required you to have a device on site to provide that, that directory of usernames and passwords. Mytech has worked, and we are now providing Active Directory services without requiring a local server to be on site at our customers. So essentially what we do is we spin up a dedicated private Active Directory server for you in our hosted environment at our co-location facilities. We provide exclusive access to you and your site to a single instance of the Windows server. That allows us to create user groups, computer groups, apply group policy objects for remote scripting and lockdown, and yet still maintain full compatibility with all of the solutions that we've talked about already today without requiring the end user to maintain any hardware on site. The product that we're offering includes the Microsoft licensing and also the management's product under our Essentials program within the monthly cost that's charged for that service. So again, this is not a perfect fit for everyone, but for those small organizations, in general, folks less than 25 people, who may have found alternate ways of hosting the data and the day-to-day access and functional needs they have outside of a local server, they still need to have a method to lock down the PCs and determine who can access what and where. And this provides that service without requiring the capital investment.
You know, Philip, one of the other things that I know, you know, we feel strongly about is if you're leveraging a hosted solution, there's inherent redundancy built into that solution. Microsoft has built dispersed redundancy and infrastructure greater than any one of us could ever afford ourselves. And then if you want to integrate it with Active Directory, then sometimes it ends up being relying on a single server and a single internet connection that you have at your local office. So, you know, can you talk about how that's also part of the genesis of this as far as thinking about how it applies to providing additional redundancy in those kind of environments?
Sure. So there are a number of scenarios in which a offsite component of Active Directory may be desired. Again, if you are using a lot of cloud-based solutions that synchronize with Active Directory, one of the benefits of those is the idea that if the headquarters building or your primary location goes offline or experiences some kind of disruption, the rest of the cloud-based services can continue to work. There are situations in which when you integrate your cloud-based solution with your Active Directory for single sign-on purposes, you have accidentally reintroduced a single point of failure into your network. So although the data may exist out in the cloud, you won't be authorized to access it because the systems in place won't be able to contact the Active Directory infrastructure. This hosted Active Directory product can also be used to supplement an existing on-premise Active Directory infrastructure for those purposes. Other purposes where we've seen use cases are for those who have virtualization infrastructures, either with Hyper-V or with vSphere. Both of those virtualization infrastructures, should there be a need for a total shutdown or a offline event, they're all dependent on having Active Directory working in order to to even start themselves up. So you can get yourself into a chicken and the egg problem where you can't start your virtualization environment without having Active Directory. But if your Active Directory is entirely hosted on your virtualization infrastructure, it can require some wand waving to make that work. Having an offsite hosted Active Directory as a backup can make sure that that environment, that information is available to the virtualization infrastructures before they come online. So those are just a couple of use cases for that. We've also seen use cases for the hosted Active Directory when we have multi-site components. If folks need to have a centralized location where they want to consolidate between multiple offices, have an additional Active Directory presence.
Yeah, Phil, I think one of the things that, you know, and you mentioned it earlier, but I think the biggest impact that I've seen for having Active Directory, and I think where Active Directory is underestimated, is, you know, smaller organizations. As you mentioned, this is really designed for smaller organizations that want to say, well, why do I need to have a server here in my office? But yet you want to leverage different hosted solutions that are out there in the marketplace today, and so you're really talking to different providers, and like even the three other solutions that we talked about, those are 3 different providers that all have 3 different authentication methods. However, they all can integrate with Active Directory, and so you think about trying to create a simpler environment for your users, but yet you don't want to have to pay for an investment of a server in your infrastructure and make that investment and have that in your office. This is a way where you can kind of tie those different solutions together and give your users, again, that single username and password that also enables you as an organization to turn off access to all those different platforms by disabling someone's username and password. So that's definitely a piece where this whole movement to the cloud and the idea of getting physical equipment out of your environment, it's great, but without having some sort of a central repository for you know, capturing and synchronizing usernames and passwords, it makes it a much more complex environment actually for your staff from which to operate. Any other comments on that section, Philip?
I think I would comment and kind of again why Mytech has released this product. Is Microsoft themselves, since they own the intellectual property behind the Active Directory, has been with their Azure platform, which is their hosting platform, has been discussing releasing a Azure-based Active Directory infrastructure. In fact, they have done so, and although Mytech was expecting to rely upon that as a method of having Active Directory in the cloud, once the product was actually released, we saw some pretty striking restrictions and limitations on the product. The primary of which is the Active Directory inside of Azure or Azure Directory only supports users. It will not allow you to manage computers or provide group policy objects, which are features that Mytech uses day to day for every network that we manage, and that I presume most businesses expect to be able to define what computers can and cannot contact their network and to apply security-based rules on an automatic basis through the group policy infrastructure. And those aren't available with the Azure-hosted AD. So just some background there as to where this product came from.
Fantastic. Well, that's it that we have for today. I guess I want to go to the last slide and just kind of do a summary wrap-up. You know, the 4 solutions, we really just wanted to make sure that as the whole cloud and hosted, there's so many different solutions that are out there, and you know, not all of them are a good fit for everybody. And so, but the ones that we've seen strong use cases across the small business segment of our customers that we support, you know, O365 and the cost, the fact that the costs have been dropping significantly over the last couple of years, different ways to license the product, your office licensing, because that's always a significant expense for customers. Being able to use file synchronization, because we're more and more mobile today than we've ever been before. And so being able to find ways to creatively get people fast performance and access to their files, but yet not necessarily have to rely upon, you know, an internet connection at a coffee shop or at a hotel or something like that. You know, then the email continuity piece. Wow, I tell you that if anyone says they don't use email on a regular basis, you know, that's for their business communication. That has been so critical. In addition to email encryption, obviously, and archiving is more of the exceptions to the commonality, but everyone wants 100% uptime to their email. And so here's some key solutions to be able to do that, which is why we think that's a key solution that a lot of our customers should be looking at, or at least thinking about for 2015. And then finally, really pulling it all together, as Philip said, is there's some products that are out there, but even Microsoft's solution really wasn't making sure that we could fulfill, like just take the server out of our environment, but yet we lose a lot of key functionality and security by doing that, and user simplification for your staff to be able to actually access a lot of these tools. So that's why these are the 4 tools that we felt, the 4 hosted solutions that we felt are really going to be key across a lot of our customers for the next year. So Philip, any final thoughts before we sign off?
I'm good. I just invite anyone from the audience, if they have any further questions, to either raise your hand immediately using the panel provided in the GoToWebinar function, or feel free to take our information and contact us directly.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great holiday season, everyone, and we'll talk to you next month.
Stay warm. We'll talk to you in January.